and I'm going to broadcast, and then we're going to do a sound check, and then we're going to just run with it. So as people start to pop on, you guys give me 1 minute. We've got about 30 seconds left till my time changes here. I'm doing a sound check. I'm making sure that we are all good on Facebook. I would love to get a sound check from somebody in the webinar right now that you can hear me, and we're on all as well. I see us right now on Facebook. Perfect. Okay, so once we get that go ahead, I'm going to do a proper introduction. Waiting for my chat to light up here. Somebody let me know we're good. Waiting. And usually, yep. Okay, so David, you're raising your hand, but if someone could just tell me in chat, it'd be fantastic. Hold on. So Andre, can you hear me okay? I'm going to call you guys out. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Heather. Appreciate you guys. Yeah, there's always going to be a little bit of a delay. All right, so today we are talking with Dr. Kasia. She's a doctor of clinical functional nutrition in clinical practice since 2005. She's the CEO of Holistic Nutrition Naturally and EBV Educational Institute. She specializes in complex gastrointestinal issues and Epstein-Barr virus. She also provides EBV certification programs to practitioners and is the author of the EBV Solution. She consults nationally and internationally from her virtual clinic. And we've got a lot to cover, but I want to give everyone a heads up. You guys, questions go in the Q&A box if you're in the webinar. If you're on Facebook and you put questions in the comments, I'll go there last. But we are in a time situation today. At 12:50, we're going to be watching the time, and we're going to let Dr. Kasia get back to her business. So let's dive right in, and let's get started right away. Thank you so much for being here with us. Tell us, what is Epstein-Barr virus?
I am so excited. I didn't know it would be live. So hi, everyone.
Yes.
Hi, coaches. You're changing the world, so keep working on it. Epstein-Barr, well, no, it's a virus that's been on this planet for 1 million of years, way ahead of us. And 95% of global population has that virus. And so probably majority of our lifespan as a species, we've had it and we cohabited, and there wasn't really much problem, but the problem may have stemmed from toxicity, environmental toxicity, electromagnetic toxicity that really affects microbes like this virus. And so something that it may have been a tipping point when they have evolved. Something happened. But anyway, right now it's very detrimental. It changes lives. We have about 3 million recorded cases in the States alone a year of mononucleosis, which is the acute phase. Probably twice as much unrecorded. And unfortunately, autoimmune is driven from that. Quite a laundry list of autoimmune disorders. One of the formidable ones, with probably majority of you are working with, are clients with Hashimoto's and thyroid disorders, or maybe Graves, not so much, but two, lupus, sometimes arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, celiac. There's been a study that showed that celiac can be directly triggered by Epstein-Barr. Even Crohn's disease, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Possibly 60% of these cases, either of these were triggered initially by EBV infection, and the laundry list goes on and on. There's about 400,000 cases of cancer globally a year from EBV. 143,000 people died because of cancer caused by EBV in 2010, for example. That's statistics that we have. There's quite a few types of cancer that are directly caused by EBV, and there's a lot more research into colon cancer now, or breast cancer, because there's some associations as well. So tentacles are huge, and it is potentially epidemic. Now, when you as coaches work with population, probably women mostly, overworked, taxed, depressed, overweight, thyroid problem, and they're not getting better, maybe with thyroid medications, all that kind of population, that's the exact population that is at, in my book, that is at highest risk of chronic EBV. And the chronic underlying aspect of it is what medical community is completely not understanding. That's why I had to write the book.
Right.
So that's kind of the big picture, zooming out and then zooming in. There's no there's no medical tools really that are effective and statistically really advantageous. There are medications. That's never a whole solution. The medical community, research community is looking for global vaccination for Epstein-Barr. That tells you how bad it is, but that's a different story. But truthfully, there are millions of antiviral things we can do every day, and that's the most exciting thing that I discovered. So it's what we're not doing that we forgot to do, or it's the environment that has changed. If we can just sort through this mess, cleaned up, and also address spirituality or the emotional integrity of who we are, things start actually falling into place. So there's a lot of components. There's a physical, emotional, spiritual, environmental. So it's a big tentacle. Yes, it's a big deal.
Right. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. When we think, you said that 90 to 95% of the population carries the virus. Where did it come from originally? Like, how do we know? And were we born with it? Was it is it a genetic thing? Like, how do we know that many people have this virus just laying there latent, ready to blow up?
Well, it's we have parasites, we have worms, we have bacteria, we have fungi, we have more DNA of microbes than our DNA of our own cells. I mean, the question is who's the host and who's not. We would die without the microbes, and EBV has just been there. I mean, it's just, it's been on this ride. It's 1 million years old, so it's been on this planet much longer than we have been, and we're evolved together, except now is a bad time. I mean, just to give you an example, you have an inch of black mold on the wall, and it can make, within 24 hours, it can make 20 to 40 mycotoxins. But if you expose it to an iPhone, Wi-Fi, router, suddenly it can make 2,000 mycotoxins within 24 hours. There's an old study from 1990s, before Wi-Fi, when there was a very conservative exposure. It was similar to a desktop computer. There is not wireless, to the virus, and that reactivated that virus. So microbes are highly stressed and threatened by electromagnetic insult. They will protect themselves and they will become virulent, and that I see that with EBV. So just stewing in that can tip people over and keep them in that chronic condition. So there's that's the difference now. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think also, not only that, but doesn't it seem like we're just being inundated with environmental toxins? We're inundated with trauma coming to the surface, or even underlying our subconscious that we're not aware of, where it seems like we're just being dumped on the daily by something new that's affecting us with viruses and, all the problems that we have, leaky gut, all of those things. Right. So what are the top, 3 maybe things that you would say are causes of the virus coming back to life, so to speak?
I think electromagnetic field is huge and underrated just because it's so insidious. And you can be in a coffee shop, you can walk on the street, you can be at the airport, you're on the plane. We are constantly stewing in it. Yes. That's a big one. The second biggest one is that environmentally, the nutrient density in foods that we eat now is not the same it was 100 years ago. So in order to get the same amount of antioxidants from an apple or an orange, you need much more of that than just 50 years ago. The density is dropping. The body's not getting the building blocks and the antioxidants. These are the biggest needle movers against EBV. So literally, one junky meal in a fast food joint can, it doesn't have any antioxidants, but it gets worse. It creates inflammation by driving up something called NF-kappa B. Just one meal like that, it was a study, 2 hours, 150% increase in NF-kappa B. NF-kappa B is an inflammatory marker that is hijacked by EBV and is used to replicate. So the more of, so you're losing the density of real foods, and then you have junky food that actually increase that inflammatory driver. So the virus has more of the opportunity to latch onto it, replicate within that, and drive more. So it's like we have double whammy, triple whammy, and then the sleep deprivation, the shifts at work. Nurses have the notoriously bad shifts that just dysregulates their whole body. But the sleep deprivation of the poor quality of sleep, you can also track it to the electromagnetic field, the blue light, the sleep pattern is really insulted. If you don't sleep properly, you have inflammation. Inflammation will drive the virus up. And then the biggest driver of all in the research in my clinic of anything that I've seen is any type of stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't that really where we should start with everything?
With everything. So astronauts go in space and they can reactivate in space because of the stress on the body. Mm-hmm. I talked to researchers that work with NASA because I was saying, you guys need to do something about it. They're going to get EBV. It's like, of course, they prophylactically get antiviral medications already when they go. So it's like, really? Because and that stress is not just physical. Physical is lack of sleep is stress. Poor diet is stressful on the body. Grieving losses, personal losses, grieving a life you don't have, or having a job that doesn't serve you, doing things on the planet that you're not designed to do when you're supposed to maybe be a healer and contribute, but you're locked in a job. So even stressors like that, there is a bursting point when at a certain point it's just not sustainable spiritually, emotionally, physically. So you guys are so good at that. You see all that. So it's not something new that you have to do, but right. You really have to drive it with this population. Tell them there's no easy fix. Some of my patients say that EBV is the best teacher because it forced them to reinvent what they thought about themselves, being in overdrive, overachieving for the wrong reasons, like overdoing, type A personality, that's the worst for EBV. And so they have to really start paying attention and respecting the body too, and the body boundaries and the physicality, physical limitations. So it's like it's perfect for health coaches actually.
Yeah, I love that you're saying this because, the Institute for Functional Health Coaching, we have those 7 foundations we focus on. And I always say, everybody's always talking about starting with food, start with food. And I'm like, but you can't even digest food if you're under stress of any kind. Just even thinking, whenever I do interviews like this, I think back about my own experiences with my health and the things that I've been through, because I'm a AAA personality. I go further. It's not type A, it's AAA. But I will tell you this, many years ago, I was experiencing the fatigue and my throat was swelling. I could not even, I just was exhausted all the time.
EBV, yes.
Yes, exactly. And what I did when you just said that about it being the best teacher, I automatically said, if my body says it's time to rest, then I rest. I would just set an alarm and I would lay down in the middle of the floor on a hardwood floor with a blanket and a pillow and a patch of sun. And I would just stop whatever I was doing. Yeah. And I honestly can tell you that I think changing the perception of stress and sleeping when I was supposed to got me through that so much faster than it could have been, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So tell me this, you said something about mono being the acute stage earlier. So reminding everyone, acute is immediate, chronic is long-term, right? Do you have to have mono is that always a precursor to EBV?
No. So in fact, there is a percentage of population that never remembers having mono.
Yeah.
It depends where your immune system is at a given time, because it can be mild. It could be just like flu and you just, shake it off and go on living your life. But the real mono is at least 6 weeks of being completely disabled in bed, bedridden, like you say, complete fatigue and so on and so forth. It's just that for some people it never turns off and becomes chronic. And undercurrent, and you're never quite the same after that particular incident. For some people, mono will come often when in puberty, when you're in high school, when there are hormonal changes, when you go to college because you don't sleep, you party, there's junky food, there's all these perfect little storm. Also, right after birth of a child, when a lot of women have postpartum depression, if they're lucky, they get tested for Hashimoto's, and if that's it, that might be also. Then menopause, when hormonal changes start. Sometimes the flare-ups are actually within the menstrual cycles. If it's really bad, it's like every time I have a period, it seems to be worse. So that's pretty bad. But for some people, you know, in infancy, especially in the Western world, in infancy, you may have just a mild little hiccup and parents probably don't even remember because it wasn't a big deal. And, it, you know, it's just there, and it just depends on the environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are some of the symptoms of EBV besides obviously fatigue, but give us a little bit of a laundry list? Because don't you believe, I wrote a book on the thyroid, an ebook, and I call some of these things masters of mimicry, because estrogen dominance and thyroid problems and low iron, they all have all of these same symptoms. So EBV probably falls in with some of that, right?
Yes, it's exactly. Whether it's molds, heavy metal, EBV, I mean, thyroid, it's like one bag. Oftentimes it may be fever, maybe lymph, throat, neck hurting, very tender lymph nodes. It could be headaches, could be actually severe hypersensitivity to mosquito bites, but that's more chronic. Lethargy, apathy, severe fatigue. Basically, people feel like a truck ran them over.
Okay.
It's like that's classic. That's more classic for mono. Yeah.
Okay. And how long? And so, what's happening when people start to feel these symptoms? They think, oh, I've got a cold, or maybe I've got the flu, or it's my adrenal glands, which I believe are the messengers anyway. They're not the problem; they're the messengers. Right. So how long do people typically go before they actually go see a doctor, and what happens when they get there?
Sometimes they don't, so they wait it out because it's like flu. They're just going to be in bed and so on and so forth. Well, the traditional way of looking is about 6 weeks, and then you go back and that's over, right? If you go to the doctor, they will tell you there's nothing that they can do. If it's probably mono, they may or may not test, and go home and rest. There's absolutely nothing we can do. And that's the end of the story. It's perfectly fine, except in percentage of population, it's not. And if you wait it out, it's not good enough, because the longer the virus is working, the more of your cells it infects. It gets into those cells, especially B cells, and then it immortalizes them. So they start signaling differently. They cannot signal for help. So other immune cells come and destroy them. They cannot self-terminate anymore, because the virus messes up with their signaling mechanisms. So they're perpetually hanging there forever in manufacturing those little virions, the new little baby viruses. And then when the environment is ripe, like stress, those B cells burst. We call it lysine. Those new youngster viruses spill into the bloodstream, and then basically the purpose of the virus is to move from the bloodstream into organ system. It could be spleen, it could be liver, it could be connective tissue, connective tissue disorders. I've had cases. It could be your joints, it could be your thyroid, it could be your brain. You could have cerebral ataxia when it affects your ability to control movement. It can live in your inner ear. A lot of people have buzzing, noises, pain in the ear, and they start having balance problems exactly from that vestibular nerve and maybe that ataxia. So, and then it can create the trickling effect of autoimmunity. There's different mechanisms of it. One is citrullination. That's the only virus that does that. So different autoimmunity, and then possibly from scarring, you may develop some forms of cancer. And then, of course, there's main cancer types like larynx cancer, thyroid cancer, possibly stomach cancer. 10% of stomach cancer may be induced by EBV, caused by EBV. So, yeah, it's okay to say go and rest and there's nothing to do, but for the population that eventually will go chronic, that's not good enough. You can stall the virus. You can take certain measures immediately, so you can recover fast, but you also learn how to keep it at bay, so you never let it grow.
Yeah, we're going to talk about those modalities in a moment, but let's talk about testing. So let's say someone's a little bit more savvy than the average layperson, right? And they're like, I'm not feeling right. This is not the flu. I'm going to go to my doctor and see if this is the virus. What kind of tests do we ask for?
Story of my life. You ask for 4.
Okay.
VCA-IgM, VCA-IgG, EAD-IgG, or EA-IgG, whatever you have access to. And then EBNA, no, EBNA-IgG. This is the standard. This is standard. And lo and behold, they don't test all 4. And it's just frustrating. But honestly, people go even for 2 years knocking on the doors to doctors who would be willing to even test those 4, which is really, really frustrating. And so we created a website for resources for EBV, and I have a whole page with labs, and I literally just have 2 samples. I have 2 buttons where you can click 2 samples of direct-to-consumer labs. When if you have a little bit of cash, like $100 or $150, you can click there, go to a local lab, take care of it. They run the 4. You have the labs in front of you, and then you can go back to that website, and I have all kinds of analysis of interpretation. What kind of what kind of possibilities you can have in the report, so people can analyze and kind of get a better sense of what's going on, because that's also not interpreted correctly by medical community. So I have a whole chapter on that in the book, because it's just that's where people fall through the cracks. So they may spend two years looking for a doctor who will test, and then the doctor will test 3 out of 4, missing the most important one, and then they still don't have a clear picture, and then they get antidepressant medication, and they are sent to a psychiatrist, and that's just what it is right now.
So what website is that?
EBV, and then the word help, like helping people, HELP.com, EBVhelp.com.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you this too. This has always been a question I've wanted to ask, because we've talked about cytomegalovirus in the past, HSV, those things. What is the benefit of knowing, and is it IgG or IgM that says past exposure? Which one of those is, or IgA? I can never remember.
Right. M is, think about M like immediate. So M is right now.
Right.
Or the first initial infection. That's how we generally look at it. IgG is, the IgG immunoglobulins are the ones that last longest. So they kind of hang around. But that's not exactly right.
Okay.
Because if you test early antigen, it's always IgG that they test. But IgG early antigen, it flares up with reactivation. And in most people, it flares enough to show positive. So if early antigen is positive, this is the one you don't want to miss. Because this one, if it's positive, it means you tested during reactivation. Unless it's mono, you've never had a problem before, it's your first run, and then even IgM, like VCA-IgM, will be elevated. That means it's the very initial, most likely very initial infection. That's the only one. So it's a little bit different. You just it's just go to that website, look it up, and look at the different possibilities within those 4 antibodies.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So I recently had a stool test done, and EBV was one of the markers on there. It was EBV and cytomegalovirus were markers on the stool test that came up negative. Do those have any relevance at all? Are they
negative or positive?
Negative.
Yes. So this is a very good question. We're looking at PCR, which is the DNA material from the virus. There's a PCR testing also in blood serum you can do. And I never recommend it, because it only catches the immediate infection when your virus is still in the bloodstream. Remember, when it lyses, when it reactivates, or the initial infection, it is in your bloodstream for a few weeks. But it's not its destination and leaves the blood as soon as it can. It travels to organ systems, it travels to tissues, to glands, wherever it wants to implant, whether it's the liver, spleen, brain, thyroid, connective tissue joints. We talked about that. So if you missed the particular deadline to test these things, they will become negative. I've never seen, I use a lot of stool testing. Pretty much all my new patients, we pretty much run it and rerun it. I have to yet see EBV positive in the stool test.
Okay.
It's going to be mostly irrelevant, because the virus is, by that point, the virus is chronic. So the damage is being done in the thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see DNA in the bloodstream.
Okay. Okay. So once it makes its way from the bloodstream into the tissues, the organs, or wherever it chooses to go, probably where we're most susceptible, right? Where we are weakest, where do we hold trauma and problems and all of those things. How do you test for that? Does it move from the blood into the tissues and then it's gone, or how do we know this?
You do test and retest. So you have your track record. But for me, it depends on the condition. So let's say I had a patient with Sjorgen's. So it has different causes, but one of them is EBV. So she wasn't producing saliva for many years, dry mouth, and she also had EBV. She also had Hashimoto's. So there was a lot of work we did. We worked half a year, and she had all kinds of conditions too on top of that. But we were able to stabilize thyroid, so antibodies became normal.
Okay.
And antibodies to Hashimoto became normal. So if you have lupus, suddenly the lupus kind of recedes. Or if you have rheumatoid arthritis, suddenly you're fine. Or if, it depends what it was. So if your main symptom was just terrible fatigue and depression, that shifts. So the proof is in the pudding, and it depends. But also some of the lab results will always stay positive. So that's also, people shouldn't be hanging their lives on some of these markers, because at least 2 of them will probably remain positive for their lifetime, and it doesn't mean you're healed and you're doing fine and it's just what it is. You have that memory. So it gets really complicated, and in a way it's so simple, but people get stuck in different parts of this big picture and get really depressed and can't move forward. And labs are one of those things when you can really get stuck.
Yeah. So let's talk about the big question everybody's going to have is, how do you go? Actually, you know what? I'm gonna ask let me ask one question first. I promised this girl, in case she couldn't attend, that I would ask her question. So give me one moment, make sure that I've got it pulled up here. She was interested in your thoughts on UVB irradiation and ozone therapy on top of the protocol she's already on, which it's a very lengthy email that she went through. She's really she really suffered. Her brain, digestive tract, everything just stopped working, and she went into emergency mode. She's been improving every day, but she's wondering what your thoughts are on UVB irradiation and ozone therapy for helping her through this.
I understand ultraviolet light or infrared light. I think they can work if the virus is in the bloodstream. I'm not sure if when it's in the tissues, in the glands, I don't know. Ozone, I really honestly don't know.
Okay.
I haven't gone there. I haven't had to go there. Yeah, there's simpler things to do. So
okay, let's launch into that. What are the simpler things to do?
We basically talked about a lot of stuff that you guys already are doing. Mm-hmm. But like you mentioned, the diet is, yes, of course, paramount, but where do you start when people are so incapacitated, right? And we are now building a consumer online program for EBV, and that was the biggest question from the mentor that is training me how to create it properly was, what moves the needle the fastest? Mm-hmm. Where do we hit the people? Where do we start the program where you can give something to a person when it doesn't require cooking and standing and chopping, when they, but what is it that moves the needle fastest so they can feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit more steady and energetic, and then they have faith and they can step in and do something more. Right. So of course, rest, sleep, stress management, all that, these are biggies, but I have to say, before food, because that takes time, I would say supplements. Okay. I would, because that's what I see.
Okay. What kind of supplements?
And you have to be aggressive enough. And if it's EBV, it's very simple. Like if you do the max doses, you start seeing the difference. If you stop them, you go back. It's like you're killing them, you're putting them in the corner, they stop replicating, and then you take it away. So it's very easy to see if actually the EBV is causing all these problems. Mm-hmm. What if it's not? But if that doesn't happen, that's it's either not EBV, or you have molds, you have a lot of EMF, you have to clean that, you have heavy metals, you have to figure that out. There's something else. These three are the big ones: the molds, toxic molds, electromagnetic field, radiation, and what was the third one I said? Heavy metals.
Okay.
These are the big complications when it just blurs everything, and then the supplements are not quite performing, or it's not EBV.
Okay.
Causing problems. So the biggest ones that I talk about them in the book, like start there and watch and see what happens. That would be NAC.
Okay.
And you go for it. I mean, it's generally safe up to 4,500, but you can start with, let's say, 1,200 milligrams 3 times a day. And then you add lysine to it, maybe 1 gram 3 times a day together, both of them away from foods. And then licorice, maybe 30 drops, 35 drops, maybe 2-3 times a day earlier in the day. Unless you have high blood pressure or you're on medication, that may not be a good idea. It's great for adrenals when they're really taxed and you're really exhausted. That may also help. If you get gut problems, inflamed gut, licorice is very soothing as well. There's a lot of applications. And then, so I see zinc, even, these babies, very simple.
Oh yeah, yep.
These are elderberry zinc. It's by Zand, Z-A-N-D. It's only 5 milligrams, but you know, if you have lymph involvement, tonsils may be involved, larynx involved, sucking on these is very practical. And then, you know, research supports that lozenges are actually effective, and zinc is really formidable. So just pop it right there and have it in the mouth a few times a day. So even starting there, and then you're going to build on it. You need a lot of antioxidants. It hates antioxidants. Mm-hmm. Absolutely hates them. So guilt-free fruits, finger fruits, a big bowl of organic grapes, you know, an orange and lemon in the tea, just fruits, berries, wild berries like blueberries, wild blueberries in smoothies, wherever you can, you know, I can eat a bowl of raspberries just like that. For me, it's a delicious, amazing snack. Don't be afraid of fruits. This is fruitophobia in this country is dramatic. I've never seen anything like it. And I mean, that's just free food. You don't have to worry about it. If you have a problem with fruit, something else is going on.
Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm. I can't even believe that people vilify fruit. It's
happening. Yes.
Yeah.
It has too much fructose.
Yeah, I know.
As a gastroenterologist said. And then functional medicine, be aware, functional medicine clinicians are really following it's almost dogmatic. You have to do paleo, you have to do this, you have to do this. The restrictions are inappropriate. People fall into orthorexia, people fall into, it backfires. Yes. And then you probably are doing damage control too, just expanding it and just really healing the relationship with food.
Yeah. And you know what, now that you're saying that, I'm glad that we're talking about this, because, you know, for those of you who don't know what orthorexia is, basically fear of everything you put in your mouth. Really, if you look at it, you're afraid of everything. It seems like it's narrowing your food options down to the point where you're afraid to put something in your mouth. I mean, I remember that term coming out, you know, many years ago.
It's a medical term for a place where you are cornered on your quest to be healthy, to a point where you perceive foods are bad or good. Yep. And you only eat organic, you only eat this quality, you only use this brand, this is tainted, you can't socialize with people because this is bad food. So it's a psychological process. It has nothing to do with food, but it's the quest for purity and excellence. It's driven by type A personality compensatory mechanisms. It's you don't have a life. This is driving your life. So it's completely out of balance. I see some of that. And it always backfires. So just watch out.
We're pushing out, I mean, whole food groups are being ignored. And couldn't that be part of the reason that people are struggling with this? Not only the stress, but if they're not giving themselves all of these amazing colors that we're supposed to be having in our food and our diet. I mean, it's a big component. I agree. Right. So tell me about lauricidin. Do you believe that lauricidin is helpful for EBV?
Yes, it's very interesting. So I customize things. It is in my book. It is research. What it does is has the ability to puncture through the envelope around the virus, and so disables it and kills it. Interestingly, it's not my go-to because I have the other things. So if you do the other things, so here's the deal. People have a limited ability to swallow things and take supplements and pay for them. So, and I am a nutritionist, so I have a hammer and I'm looking for nails. And for me, it's nutritional status. Where can the money make the biggest impact?
Right.
Do I pick monolaurin or do I pick NAC? Oh, I forgot to tell you, selenium, of course.
Yeah.
Selenium is one of the big 5 drivers, up to 800 micrograms total, not more, because it can be toxic. So if you guys are taking different supplements, or your clients do, they need to look at every label to make sure that selenium is not added somewhere, not more than 800. If there's a petite or small frame or small person, maybe 600. That's a needle mover. Would I pick selenium or would I pick monolaurin? Absolutely selenium, because selenium is necessary, absolutely imperative for your thyroid. Selenium is imperative to make glutathione in your liver. Selenium is imperative for your detoxification processes in your liver and liver support. Why would I take monolaurin if it only kills the cells, but it doesn't provide any nutritional support? When people are immune compromised, immune cells, immunoglobulins, if you look at things you can do for them, they require nutrients too.
Yes.
So my biggest 5, lysine is a nutrient, NAC is a nutrient, selenium is a nutrient, zinc is a nutrient. Licorice is the only herb in this big 5 for me, because that's so formidable. But I use herbs as adjuncts, other herbs as teas. So whenever you put something in your mouth, you have to drink, instead of drinking water, you can drink lemon balm. You can drink, stinging nettle. You can drink dandelion. You can drink rosehip or hibiscus tea, vitamin C, antiviral. So you have that constant antiviral signaling, but the nutrients are the foundation. So we add vitamin E, we add vitamin C, we add vitamin A. They're huge.
Yeah.
They do so many different jobs. So do I get to monolaurin? No, I often don't, unless they have a lot of fungal infection, because that's great too. If I have co-infections instead of monolaurin, I might use olive leaf extract because it is antifungal, it is anti-EBV, it also is anti-gram-negative bacteria, which is Klebsiella, which is all the bad bugs. Monolaurin doesn't touch that.
Right.
So yes, for some people, monolaurin is very effective. They can do that, but by itself, for me, it's not even the biggest thing.
Right.
Can you see? Like that's why I grew into this process, and that's where I see it. That's how I do it. Of course, there's millions of ways to do it, I'm sure, but this seems to be working. Yeah, sometimes I will use it, but not always.
I love that you said I interviewed Terry Cochran last week, and we talked about Lyme disease and the foundation of Lyme and the viruses being the foundation of all of the co-infections in Lyme. It was really fascinating. She also brought up selenium, and we were talking about how some people have their DNA or they have a genetic SNP or a mutation on their oxidation pathway or how they can use glutathione, and she recommended selenium as an option for people. Yeah, instead of NAC or glutathione, while people are trying to open up those pathways. It's the first time I'd ever heard of that before.
Well, you always want to go upstream. So it's the same way like doing, let's say, medication for thyroid when you supply T4 or T3. Yes, you do, but go upstream. You just go to the building blocks. What makes the thyroid make the hormones? You need the selenium, you need the iodine, you need the iron, you need to, and so it always goes upstream. So glutathione I use rarely, only in very specific situations, and not so much with EBV, just because NAC and selenium will build it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I need those two to do other things for the body too.
Yeah.
Because they're so versatile. NAC does a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I love that approach, that minerals are in the antioxidants instead of just killing things. You've got that first step. That's a great tip. Yeah. So Michael, I think we covered some of what foods are best to mitigate EBV, but let's tie this other piece of my question in too. What are your thoughts about the keto food plan because everybody thinks the keto diet is the answer for everything, but that's cutting out large food groups, right? So is that something people are talking about, pushing viruses down with the keto diet? Right? I know
you
have
to answer that question.
Yes.
Okay, well, let me put it this way. Theoretically, we have capacities, okay? We're America's great about pushing agenda and discovering new things. You can discover great things in medicine, but you can't rediscover food. Food is food. We're designed the way we're designed. You can move the brain into ketogenic diet and running on fat within 4 days. You can do it. Have I seen miraculous things happen? No, I have not. Yes, you can control blood glucose beautifully, very fast, like a miracle, but other things starts falling into pieces. People may develop a glaring iron deficiency, falling hair. My concern is we only have one liver and one gallbladder. Fat processing is difficult. I mean, coconut oil is wonderful. It's different. It's medium chain triglycerides, which is used for energy. It's not processed. It's still difficult for the body. And the gallbladder can take only so much fat. We're not designed for it. We're designed for roughage. We have grinders.
Yes.
These are the grinders. We don't salivate looking at prey. And you could kill a person by just providing all fiber-free food. You could kill because the colon stops and you're done. So you need roughage, you need plants. You don't need too much fats, even the good fats.
Right.
So I am sorry there are people that swear by ketogenic diet. I want to see a person on it for 15 years and see where they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's look at that and see, you can be on raw vegan diet, and after maybe a decade or 15 years, if you're strict with it and if you don't budge and you don't expand, you may start seeing some deficiencies. It's just, we need to be more flexible, but we need to honor the fact that we are plant eaters. Majority of the health, the antioxidants, the highest are in the fruits and then vegetables. The roughage is good for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, no offense, everybody's different, and so on. Sometimes when people say they don't do well on plant-based diets, they don't know how to balance meals. They don't know. I have big chapters in the book because I have to do 101 with people. Why do you dip at 3 p.m.? Is it the diet, or is it actually what you do with the diet?
Yeah.
Is it because I'm eating plants, so it's not working for me? Is it blood type? Is it this? Is it that? It's and I think maybe because we have so many different traditions as Americans, culinary traditions, but we left them behind, and we have this Americanized way of life that is artificial. We don't have the grounding like people that come from other cultures. Like I have an advantage because I grew up in Poland. So, there was a lot of meat and all that, but the tradition was older. And so you have a little bit more grounding. And here there is a generation that was in the 50s that was taught to go modern. And so you have that disconnect. I think we lost bearings with food, so we don't trust foods, we don't understand it, so we look for the next best thing, feeling that if we do keto, it's a new thing. Well, how come we haven't discovered it before? I mean, yes, indigenous Indians in Alaska, up in Arctic Circle, they have to sustain the way they do. So they have evolved, they have ways to do it, but we don't live there.
Yeah.
So I have concerns as a clinician, and honestly, if a person comes to me and they're insistent on it, I will work around it, making sure that it's all safe and they have all the nutrients, but I would never personally and professionally recommend it to anyone except seizures. But I also saw cases in studies of seizures that may have been induced by EBV. And in that case, it may not be the needle that would move the person forward either. So
yeah. And I think I think the way that people are, I mean, maybe this is just a little bit off topic, but people make decisions on what they eat based on what they look like or what they think they should look like. It's not about their health or how they feel. I'm seeing that more than anything. If you lose 35 pounds on keto, then keto must be for you. Well, what if you didn't need to lose 35 pounds and your health is now going downhill, right? Yeah, I'm seeing that.
I'm thinking that the 30-pound loss, especially rapidly, that's not healthy. But if it's a little slower, like sustainable, it may be some of it is inflammatory fat. So just, you know, on keto diet, you won't have gluten, you won't have American wheat. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great, we're going to lead that right into this next question. How do grains, eating them or not eating them, feed into EBV? She doesn't eat them because of multiple autoimmune issues, with Hashimoto's being the large and in charge disease at the moment, and they cause a flare for her.
Depends on person. It really depends on the person. I will not restrict gluten-free grains unless we know that people is reactive. If you have celiac, you may have cross-reactive foods. Millet, corn, rice, and yeast are 4 big ones, and oats sometimes. And that's because of cross-reactivity. It has nothing to do with anything else.
Right.
So every time you have any of those, then it's as bad as gluten exposure. Do you know it? No. Can you test it? Yes. There is the lectin and agglutinin and all these theories that it's so bad for you. It's not practically and clinically as relevant. Can you test it? Yes, some of them you can test, especially lectins from beans, not so much from grains. The grains may not be tolerated for other reasons that may be SIBO. It really is like you have to work with somebody who has some bearings and then learn whether it's periodical, whether it's long term. Grains are not counterindicated in ABV at all, unless the gut is so involved and so porous, they can't handle it because they have so much leakiness and infections. People are infected by other pathogens with EBV as well. So this is not about grains. The quinoa, millet, amaranth, teff are very healing and gluten-free certified, clean oats. They're very healing. They're very substantial. They have a lot of magnesium, which women fail to get in diet. So you have better cycles, you have better mood, less anxiety, sleep better, because the grains and legumes all have that. The grains and legumes also have molybdenum. You're not going to get molybdenum in other places. It's a rare mineral that is responsible for a lot of inflammation if you don't have it, more yeast if you don't have it, and we're not getting it if we're restricting those two groups. So I don't see a validity of restricting grains gluten-free unless I get to know the person. And yes, we definitely have some issues. We have to take these out and find alternatives.
Yeah. Okay. So last question here, and then we're going to let you get back to work. If tinnitus is initiated by EBV, would you treat that area directly? If so, how?
Oh yeah. I would go for selenium, NaC, lysine, licorice, zinc, start there. This is a great litmus test, you know. I'll give you a story, and I teach that to my patients. I have those little things at home. I have a little virus I haven't tested. I have no interest in knowing. I know what to do with it. And for me, it's the ear. It begins with the ear. So if you have a problem, my husband came from a visit at Christmas and got a year ago and got really sick before the plane, and then so I tested him and did the aggressive EBV. So it's an antiviral protocol, right? So I wanted to see if it's bacterial or viral. Viruses don't like the same thing. And I hit him with a really mega doses of the right nutrients, the antioxidants, the lysine, this. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, no improvements. So you can really find out this is not viral at all. We had to go to the doctor. He needed to get on antibiotics, unfortunately, because it was going into pneumonia. So if it's viral, if it's EBV caused, there's something that you will notice. And then if you can build on that. So you could grab my book and read. There's like almost 600 pages. There's tons of information, resources, and fully expanded protocol for supplements where you can play with it, with all kinds of counter indications and so on. So there's a lot of guidance, and I know that people that I don't know take the book and use some of the recommendations, and they start turning around and getting their lives back. So it's research, it's evidence-based, and I've been practicing those ideas in my clinic, and they seem to work.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's another good point. I'm going to plug this free book in here that you're sending to everybody. And it's good for anyone. It's good for EB. It's good for anyone, you said. So yeah, she's giving us a free gift, and we appreciate it so much, talking about how to get the kitchen healthier. And you guys, here's one thing I want to encourage you to do too. It's about how to make the kitchen healthier. And it's got a short video in a health food store for gluten-free shopping. Share these links with your clients, okay? These aren't just for us. Whenever I bring you someone that's offering us something to help them, share these things with your clients. Give them some more tools for their toolbox to get well. And so I love that. Here's the thing that I loved about our talk today is that you didn't throw a bunch of crazy, thoughts that everyone has to try to remember and take notes on. This is really simple, right? You feel poorly. Get the labs in the book and start making shifts and changes, according to what we were supposed to be doing all along, which is to provide our body with the best antioxidants through most natural form. And let's start seeing stress differently, really. Let's start seeing stress differently and going after the things we know are stressing us out, but we're unwilling to fix most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I find with clients all the time. They're like, oh, well, we'll work on that later. I'm like, that's a big piece. Let's work on that right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want to work on that now because it's the hardest to work on.
Exactly. Yeah. But you give us the supplements too, which a lot of people want an easy fix with pills. And that is kind of one of those things you're offering. So Peggy's asking, what is NAC? It is N-acetylcysteine is a precursor to glutathione, Peggy. So take a peek at that. I keep it on hand all the time. I've always got that on hand. So thank you so much for your time today, Kasia. I appreciate you so much. Yes, and we'll get that. We will be sending out the replay, everybody, with the link for her book. I encourage you to go out and just start searching the website. Get really familiar with this. She is right. This is an epidemic. This is sweeping our country, and we need to have a firsthand look at what's going on so we can recognize and help our clients. So thank you for helping us do that today. I appreciate it, and I know
my pleasure, Carmen.
Appreciate
Anytime when you need me.
I will have you
everyone.
back. Bye, everybody. Thank you.